Commander Jake Morrison stared through the viewport of his patrol vessel as it drifted around Kepler Station. 12 years he'd been doing this, checking incoming ships, verifying documents, keeping order. Dull work, but necessary. The station buzzed with activity. Traders from every corner of the galaxy converged here. Purple-skinned Vorthak merchants hawked their crystals. Tall, wispy ethereals performed their haunting melodies. Even the stone-bodied granite folk arrived with metal wares. Jake had witnessed it all. "Commander, something odd on the sensors," his officer announced. A young Saurian called Kess. The reptilian alien gestured at his display with a clawed finger. "Massive vessel approaching. Truly massive." Jake pushed off and floated over. Without planetary gravity, everyone moved by launching themselves off surfaces. He caught the edge of Kess's workstation and studied the display. The craft was enormous, dwarfing typical merchant vessels. Far larger. "What type of vessel?" Jake questioned. Kess looked puzzled. His yellow eyes blinked deliberately. "The computer identifies it as human, but that's impossible. Humans were expelled ages ago." Jake felt ice in his gut. Human. He'd heard tales about humans from older aliens. They described humans as unpredictable, violent. They battled constantly and challenged everything. So the galaxy had banished them 37 years back, sending them to the void beyond the outer edge. "Connect me to Station Command," Jake ordered. The primary display illuminated. Commander Vexar materialized. The massive Sarian bore battle scars across his features. His tone was gravelly and deep. "What's happening, Morrison?" "We've got a human vessel incoming, sir." "A substantial one." Vexar stayed silent for several heartbeats. "Human? You're certain?" "The craft is transmitting ancient human identification codes, extremely old ones." "Show me." Jake transferred the data to Vexar's quarters. While waiting, he observed the vessel growing on his display. It appeared dark gray, bristling with armaments. Built for combat, not commerce. "I've examined the archived files," Vexar finally stated. "This craft is designated the Iron Vengeance. It should have been obliterated in the final confrontation before humans departed. Yet here it stands." "What are your orders, sir?" "We honor protocol. Even humans deserve consideration for safe transit, but monitor them carefully, Morrison, extremely carefully." The Iron Vengeance glided into the station's docking area. Jake had never witnessed anything comparable up close. The craft was imposing and fierce. Dark metal with angular edges, weapon ports throughout. Even motionless, it radiated menace. A group of humans emerged from the vessel. Jake had never encountered actual humans previously. They were smaller than most aliens, yet they moved uniquely, swift and deliberate, perpetually alert for danger. The figure leading them was obviously in charge. He stood tall for a human, sporting cropped brown hair and steel-colored eyes. His uniform appeared pristine yet worn. He carried himself like a warrior. "I am Captain Alex Carter of the Earth vessel Iron Vengeance," the human declared. His voice remained steady yet powerful. "I request authorization to address the station commander." Jake descended to greet them. "I'm Commander Morrison." "Welcome to Kepler Station, Captain Carter." Carter acknowledged him. "Appreciated, Commander. We arrive peacefully." The words felt unusual. Humans requesting peace. Jake recalled stories of human conflicts, vessels exploding, worlds burning. These humans bore no resemblance to the savage fighters from ancient tales. "Come with me," Jake instructed. They traveled through the station's passages. Other aliens paused to observe the humans. Some appeared frightened, others merely curious. The humans disregarded the attention and continued forward. Commander Vexar waited in his chambers. The imposing Sarian examined the humans with his frigid yellow gaze. "Captain Carter, I never imagined encountering humans in this sector again." "Circumstances evolve, Commander," Carter responded. "We've gained much knowledge during our absence." "Have you indeed?" Vexar reclined in his seat. "And what brings you here?" We seek to return to Earth, to our homeworld. Vexar laughed harshly. Earth isn't yours any longer, human. The crystalline inhabit it now. They extract it for valuable minerals. Carter's expression remained unchanged. We understand that, but we maintain the right of return. It exists in the ancient regulations. The ancient regulations. Vexar remained quiet for an extended period. Yes, I suppose that right does exist, even after all this duration. We've transformed, Commander. We're not the identical humans who left. We've discovered peace. Jake watched Carter's face as he spoke. The human appeared composed and sincere. Yet something felt wrong. Perhaps the way Carter's gaze kept scanning, or how his personnel stood ready for conflict even while discussing peace. Acceptable, Vexar eventually said. You may traverse our territory, but you'll be observed. Any indication of the old human aggression, and you'll be expelled again. We understand, Carter said. Thank you for your consideration. After the humans departed, Jake remained in Vexar's chambers. Commander, something doesn't feel right about them. I know, Vexar said, but they possess the right to attempt reaching home, and they appear different from the old stories. Calmer. Perhaps that's what concerns me. That evening, Jake observed the Iron Vengeance departing the station. The massive craft glided smoothly into the darkness of space. As it vanished, Jake thought he detected something flashing from the vessel, like a signal beacon. But when he looked more carefully, nothing was there. In his quarters aboard the Iron Vengeance, Captain Carter spoke softly into his communication device. Control, this is Carter. Initial phase complete. They believe Exile has defeated us. A voice responded from distant space. Understood, Carter. What's your assessment? Carter smiled for the first time since reaching the station. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Weak, Control. Extremely weak. They've forgotten what we're capable of. Excellent. Proceed to Earth. Let them perceive what they wish to perceive. Acknowledged. Carter out. The captain gazed out his viewport at the stars. Somewhere beyond was Earth. Home. After 37 long years, the time had arrived to return home. But not as the aliens anticipated. Not as the broken humans they believed they'd banished. The galaxy was about to remember why they'd feared humans originally. The Iron Vengeance traveled through space like a phantom. Captain Alex Carter stood on the bridge observing the stars. Each one brought them nearer to places that once belonged to humans, places that were once home. Next destination is Mars, sir, said Lieutenant Sam Rogers. The young officer had been born during Exile. He'd never witnessed the red planet except in archived images. The crystalline have mining facilities there now. Carter nodded. Remember, Sam, we appear humble. We appear defeated. We appear sorry for what humans did ages ago. Yes, sir, but it's difficult to act weak when we're not. That's what makes us powerful now, Carter said quietly. We learned to control ourselves. They never did. The craft emerged from faster-than-light travel near Mars. The red planet appeared different now. Enormous machines covered the surface. Giant excavations had been carved everywhere. The beautiful red dust was gone, replaced by gray soil and metal structures. They've been active, said Dr. Ellen Price, the vessel's science officer. She was older than most crew members and remembered Earth before the Exile. Mars used to be magnificent, red and wild and free. Now it's just a mine. Carter said nothing. His voice remained calm, but his hands formed tight fists. A transmission arrived from the planet. Human vessel, this is Mars Control. State your purpose. Carter settled into his captain's seat and made his face appear sad and weary. Mars Control, this is Captain Carter. We're returning to Earth. We request permission to dock and purchase supplies. Permission granted. Dock at Station 5. Administrator Zetha will meet with you. Station 5 was constructed into a mountainside. It was ugly and practical. No art, no beauty, just metal and machinery. As the Iron Vengeance docked, Carter could observe crystalline workers moving about like insects. Administrator Zetha awaited them. The crystalline was tall and slender, composed of living crystal that caught the light. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. "Captain Carter, how intriguing to encounter humans again. I've heard stories about your kind. We hope they weren't too terrible, Administrator," Carter said. He kept his voice humble and soft. "Oh, they were. Violence and chaos wherever humans traveled, but you seemed different, calmer. Exile taught us many things. We learned that fighting only brings suffering." Zetha led them through the station. Everywhere they went, Carter and his personnel observed and memorized where guards stood, how many weapons they carried, how the defensive systems operated. "We've made Mars far more efficient," Zetha said proudly. "Humans wasted so much energy on pointless things. Beauty, art, emotions. We focus on what matters, profit." They passed a viewport overlooking the planet's surface. The mining machines had carved deep wounds in the ground. The ancient polar ice caps had disappeared. The thin atmosphere was filled with dust and smoke. "You've certainly changed things," Carter said. "For the better. Mars produces 10 times more resources now than when humans inhabited it. We eliminated all the waste. What about the humans who lived here? Where did they go?" "Labor camps on Earth. They work in the factories now, much. Better use of their time than the silly things they used to do." Carter's officer, Sam Rogers, stepped closer. His face was very calm, but Carter could detect the anger in his eyes. "What silly things?" "Oh, you know. Families, music, stories, pointless human emotions. We've made them more productive." "I see," Carter said. "How wise of you." That evening, Carter met with his senior officers in a secure room aboard the craft. Dr. Price had been active while they toured the station. "I made contact with the underground," she said quietly. "There are still humans hiding on Mars in the deep caverns. They've been waiting for us." "What did they tell you?" Carter asked. "Bad things. The crystalline work humans to death in the mines. Children are separated from their parents at age 5. Families are torn apart. Anyone who complains vanishes." Rogers struck the table with his fist. "We should destroy this place right now." "No," Carter said firmly. "We follow the plan. We learn everything first, then we act." "How can you stay composed, sir?" "They're killing our people." Carter looked at the young officer. "Because anger without planning is just rage, and rage is what got us exiled originally. We learned to be better than that." The next morning, they departed Mars, but not before Carter sent a coded transmission to the humans hiding in the caverns. Help was coming, soon. The Iron Vengeance visited 6 more human colonies over the next month. Each one told the same story. The aliens had taken control and made everything efficient. No waste, no beauty, no humanity. On Europa, the ice moon of Jupiter, the Vorak had transformed the underground oceans into fish farms. The humans who once lived there now worked in the processing plants. They cleaned fish for 16 hours daily. On Titan, the ethereals had constructed massive cities in the clouds. The humans lived in the dark underground mining methane gas. They never witnessed sunlight. On Proxima Colony, the granite folk had simply eliminated the human settlements. They said humans were too messy. Now it was a military installation. At each stop, Carter performed his role. He appeared humble. He appeared sorry. He appeared grateful for alien kindness. And at each stop, he learned. Troop numbers, weapon types, communication codes, weak points. Dr. Price made contact with human survivors everywhere they traveled. The underground network was larger than the aliens realized. Humans had been hiding and waiting for 37 years. They never abandoned hope, she told Carter after they left Titan. They always believed someone would return for them. Someone did, Carter said. Finally, they reached Earth. The blue planet appeared the same from space, but Carter knew it would be different up close. The aliens had been here the longest. They'd had the most time to change things. Earth Control gave them permission to land at what used to be New York. The city was gone. In its place stood a massive industrial complex. Smoke rose from thousands of factories. The air was thick and gray. Governor Quillneck met them at the spaceport. The Sarian was heavy and lazy-looking. His scales were decorated with golden jewels. He moved slowly like someone who'd never had to hurry. "Captain Carter, welcome to Earth, or as we call it now, Production Center Prime." "Thank you, Governor. It's good to be home." "Home. Yes, I suppose it once was. But we've made it so much better, so much more useful." They rode through the city in a ground vehicle. Where Central Park used to be, there was now a huge factory. The Statue of Liberty was gone. In its place stood a monument to alien efficiency. "We produce more goods here than any other planet," Quillneck bragged. "The humans are excellent workers once you train them properly." "Train them?" "Oh, yes. We had to break some bad habits. Thinking for themselves, asking questions, dreaming of better things, very inefficient behaviors." Carter kept his face calm. "How did you train them?" "Discipline, hard work, proper nutrition. We give them just enough food to work, but not enough to cause trouble. Very scientific. They stopped at a work site. Hundreds of humans in gray uniforms were building something. Their faces were thin and tired. Guards with electric sticks watched them work. An old man was carrying a heavy load. He stumbled and dropped it. A guard raised his stick to hit him. The old man looked up and saw Carter in his human uniform. "Pete Walker," the old man whispered. "I remember you. You were on the Titan Defense Force." Carter stepped forward. "I'm sorry. I don't remember." "You probably don't. I was just a mechanic. But I remember the uniform. The Earth Defense Force. I never thought I'd see it again." Governor Quillneck pushed between them. "Get back to work, human. Don't bother our guests." The old man, Pete, looked at Carter one more time. "We never stopped believing," he said quietly. "We knew someone would return." Then he picked up his load and walked away. That evening, Carter stood alone in his quarters aboard the craft. He spoke into his secure communicator. "Control, this is Carter. I've completed the reconnaissance report. They're soft, weak, stupid. They think they've broken us. Excellent. Are you ready for the next phase?" Carter looked out at the Earth below. Earth, his home, the place where humans had lived and loved and dreamed for thousands of years. "More than ready, Control." "Send the fleet. The fleet is already moving." "They'll be there in 3 days," Carter smiled. "Then in 3 days, the galaxy will remember what humans really are." Far beyond the edge of known space, where no stars gave light and no aliens had ever traveled, something moved in the darkness. It wasn't one craft, but thousands. A fleet so large it could block out the stars. Commander Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the massive station called Haven's Edge. She was born during exile like most younger humans. She'd never witnessed Earth, but she dreamed of it every night. The blue world where her kind came from, the home they'd been forced to leave. "Commander, transmission from Captain Carter," said her communications officer. A young woman named Lisa Chen Rachel took the message tablet and read it. Her face grew hard as she read about what the aliens had done to Earth, to Mars, to all the human colonies. When she finished, she looked up at the stars. "Send word to Admiral Phillips. Tell her it's time." The transmission went out across the dark fleet. On hundreds of vessels, humans prepared for conflict. But these weren't the humans the galaxy remembered. These were different, harder, smarter, more dangerous. Admiral Kate Phillips received the transmission in her flagship, the Revenge. She was 60 years old and had been fighting since childhood. She remembered the day humans were forced to leave their homes. She remembered the tears, the anger, the promise to return. "All ship commanders, report to the briefing room," she ordered. The holographic meeting room filled with the images of vessel captains from across the fleet. Men and women who'd spent their lives preparing for this moment. They had one goal: take back what was theirs. "You've all read Captain Carter's report," Admiral Phillips said. "The aliens think we're broken. They think 37 years of exile made us weak." Captain Ben Foster, commander of the destroyer Lightning, spoke up. "They're about to learn how wrong they are?" "Yes, they are. Dr. Clark, give them the intelligence summary." Dr. Tony Clark stepped forward. He was the fleet's chief planner, a thin man with gray hair who could remember every detail of every alien vessel and installation. "The aliens have grown lazy. They've been at peace too long. Their defenses are weak. Their response times are slow. They think no one would dare attack them." "What about their fleets?" asked Captain Maria Rodriguez of the Wolfpack Squadron. "Scattered. Most of their vessels are doing trade patrol or keeping their own people in line. They never expected a real conflict. Admiral Phillips nodded. We'll hit them fast and hard, before they can organize, before they can call for help, before they know what's happening. What about the humans still on the planets? Asked Colonel Jack Turner, the Marine commander. We can't just bomb everything. We won't have to. Dr. Price has been building an underground network for years. They know we're coming. They'll be ready to help. A young captain named Amy Sullivan raised her hand. She'd been born on a warship and had never known peace. Admiral, what if they surrender? What if they beg for mercy? The room went quiet. Admiral Phillips looked at each face on the display. These people had lost everything. Their homes, their families, their childhood. Some had spent their whole lives in exile. They had 37 years to show mercy, she said finally. They chose not to. Now they face the consequences. The briefing ended. The captains returned to their vessels. Across the fleet, humans made final preparations. They checked weapons. They said prayers. They looked at pictures of Earth they'd never witnessed except in old videos. Lieutenant Amy Sullivan walked through her craft, the Fury. Her crew was young like her. They'd been trained from birth for this mission. They knew every alien vessel design, every weapon type, every weakness. Are you scared? Asked her gunner, a young man named Carl Davis. No, Amy said. I'm excited. We're finally going home. The fleet began to move. Thousands of vessels, all painted black to hide in space. They moved without light, without radio signals, without any sign they existed. They'd learned to be invisible during their years in exile. The first target wasn't Earth. It was Centauri Prime, the main communication hub for the Alien Alliance. If they could take it out, the aliens couldn't warn each other about the attack. Captain Chris Anderson commanded the first attack group. His craft, the Retribution, led 50 others toward the heavily defended station. They moved slowly, carefully, like hunters stalking prey. Sensors showed 300 alien vessels around the station, reported his scanning officer. Any sign they detect us? No, sir. Our stealth systems are working perfectly, Anderson smiled. The aliens had made their vessels pretty and comfortable. The humans had made theirs invisible and deadly. All vessels, prepare for attack. Remember, we want to capture the station, not destroy it. We need their communication equipment. The human vessels moved into position around Centauri Prime. The alien defenders had no idea death was coming for them. They were relaxed, bored, thinking about going home to their families. Sir, we're in position, reported Anderson's tactical officer. Good. Send the signal to Admiral Phillips. Tell her we're ready to announce our return. Far behind them, Admiral Phillips received the transmission. She stood on her bridge and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, home. After 37 years, they were finally going home. All vessels, this is Admiral Phillips. Today we take back what was stolen from us. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you try to destroy humanity. Today we go home. She paused, thinking of all the humans who'd died in exile. All the children who'd grown up without witnessing their homeworld. All the dreams deferred and hopes crushed. Remember, we're not the same species they exiled. We're harder. We're smarter. We're united. And we're very, very angry. Attack! The order went out across the fleet. At Centauri Prime, Captain Anderson's vessels decloaked all at once. One moment, the space around the station was empty. The next moment, it was filled with human warships. The aliens had seconds to react. Their defensive systems came online automatically. Warning signals screamed across their communication networks. Officers ran to their battle stations, but it was too late. The humans had spent 37 years planning this moment. Every move was calculated. Every shot was perfect. The alien vessels exploded in silent flowers of light. Their weapons couldn't penetrate human shields. Their tactics were outdated. Their courage failed when they realized they were facing not the broken humans of the past, but something new and terrible. Station is surrendering. Sir, reported Anderson's communications officer. Good. Send in the Marines. Secure the communication center. I want to send a transmission to every alien world in the galaxy. Colonel Turner's Marines boarded the station. They moved through the corridors like shadows, taking control of everything important. The aliens they found were hiding in closets and under desks, too scared to fight. Within an hour, Centauri Prime belonged to humanity. Admiral Phillips received the confirmation. The first phase was complete. Now the real work began. Open a channel to all alien worlds, she ordered. The communication officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Phillips looked into the camera. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. People of the galaxy, this is Admiral Kate Phillips of the Human Defense Fleet. We have returned from exile. We have come home. Any who stand in our way will be destroyed. Any who harm humans will be destroyed. Any who do not surrender immediately will be destroyed. She paused, letting the words sink in. You tried to break us. You failed. You tried to destroy us. You failed. You tried to make us forget who we are. You failed. We are humanity. We are home. And we're not the same species you remember. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, alien leaders watched in horror as their displays filled with images of human warships, vessels they'd never witnessed before, vessels that made their own look like toys. On Earth, Governor Quillneck received the transmission in his office. His hands shook as he watched Admiral Phillips speak. This wasn't the broken humanity he knew. This was something else, something that made his blood run cold. He pressed his emergency button. Get me High Command. The humans are back, all of them. But High Command wasn't answering. The communication lines to Centauri Prime were dead. The humans had cut off the head of the alien alliance. Now the body would thrash around blindly while humanity reclaimed what was theirs. The conflict had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn that Exile hadn't broken humanity. It had forged them into something the universe had never witnessed before, something that wouldn't be stopped. The attack began at dawn on Earth. Governor Quillneck was eating his breakfast when the sky filled with human vessels. He dropped his food and ran to the viewport. Hundreds of black warships hung in the air above the city like angry clouds. Impossible, he whispered. Where did they all come from? His communication device buzzed with emergency calls. Governor, we're under attack. Human vessels everywhere. They're bombing the defense stations. Quillneck grabbed his emergency communicator. Send word to the fleet. Tell them to get here now. Sir, we can't reach the fleet. All communications are down. The humans took out Centauri Prime. The governor's legs felt weak. He sat down hard in his seat. How many vessels do they have? Don't know, sir. Our sensors can't count them all. Above the city, Captain Maria Rodriguez led her wolf pack of destroyers in their attack run. The alien defense platforms were shooting at them, but their weapons were old and slow. The human vessels moved too fast and hit too hard. Target the orbital guns first, she ordered her squadron. Then the communication towers. Leave the factories alone. We'll need them later. The alien gunners tried their best, but they'd been at peace too long. They missed most of their shots. The few hits they scored bounced off the human shields like raindrops. Maria's vessels destroyed the defense platforms in minutes. The alien crews barely had time to send distress signals before their stations exploded. Down on the planet's surface, Colonel Jack Turner's Marines were landing near the human work camps. The alien guards were confused and scared. They'd never witnessed real soldiers before. Most of them ran away when they observed the Marines coming. Secure the camps, Turner ordered his troops. Get our people to safety first. Then we deal with the aliens. Sergeant Paul Davis led his squad through the main work camp. The human prisoners looked up in amazement as soldiers in human uniforms broke down the gates. We're here to take you home, Davis told them. An old woman started crying. I knew you'd come back. I knew you wouldn't forget us. Never, Davis said. We never forgot. The liberation of the camps went quickly. The alien guards either fled or surrendered. Those who tried to fight were dealt with fast. The Marines had trained for 37 years for this moment. They moved like machines, but they fought like people who had something to prove. At the governor's palace, Quillneck was trying to organize a defense, but his officers were panicking. Reports came in from all over the planet. Human vessels landing everywhere, alien installations falling one by one. The communication networks destroyed. Sir, we should surrender, said his military commander. We can't fight them. There are too many. Surrender to humans? They're just clever animals. We taught them their place once. We can do it again. Sir, these aren't the same humans we exiled. These are different. They have vessels we've never witnessed, weapons we don't understand. They move like they've been planning this for decades. Before Quillneck could answer, the wall of his office exploded. Through the smoke came Turner himself, followed by 6 Marines. The aliens in the room threw down their weapons and raised their hands. "Governor Quillneck," Turner said calmly. "You're under arrest for crimes against humanity. You can't do this." "I'm a representative of the Galactic Council. I have diplomatic immunity." Turner smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The Galactic Council doesn't exist anymore. We just destroyed their capital. As for diplomatic immunity, you lost that when you enslaved our people. The Marines took Quillneck away. As they did, he could hear the sounds of fighting all over the city. But it wasn't really fighting. It was just aliens fleeing while humans took back what was theirs. In space above Earth, the alien fleet finally arrived. Admiral Corrin commanded 60 warships, the largest force the Saurians could gather on short notice. He was confident they could drive off the human raiders, just like the old days, he told his officers. Humans are brave but stupid. They fight with their hearts instead of their heads. We'll crush them easily. But when his fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, they found something they didn't expect. The human vessels were waiting for them in perfect formation. Not scattered like raiders, but organized like a real navy. "Sir," said his scanning officer, "I count over 200 human vessels, all military class, all armed with weapons I don't recognize." Admiral Corrin felt cold fear in his stomach. "That's impossible." "Where did they get so many vessels?" His answer came in the form of a communication from the human fleet. Admiral Phillips appeared on his display. She looked older than the humans he remembered from the conflict, but her eyes were harder. "Admiral Corrin," she said, "I'm Admiral Kate Phillips. You have one chance to surrender." "Take it." Corrin tried to sound brave. "Human, you're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now and we might let you live." Phillips smiled. "Outnumbered? Let me show you something." The space around Corrin's fleet suddenly filled with more human vessels. They seemed to appear from nowhere, decloaking all around the alien formation. The aliens found themselves surrounded by over 500 human warships. "Now," Phillips said, "would you like to reconsider?" Corrin looked at his tactical display. The human vessels were in perfect position. They could destroy his entire fleet before he could fire a shot. His officers were staring at their displays in shock. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We sent you away." "You were broken, defeated?" "No," Phillips said. "You sent us to school. You taught us that the galaxy responds only to strength. Thank you for the lesson. I surrender." "Good. Order your vessels to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded." The battle for Earth was over. It had lasted less than 6 hours. The humans had won so completely that most aliens never even got a chance to fight. Dr. Kevin Lee, the fleet psychological warfare expert, broadcast transmissions to alien worlds all over the galaxy. "This is what happens to those who harm humanity," he said, showing images of burning alien vessels and surrendering governors. "We're not the species you remember. We're what you made us, and we're coming for all of you." The broadcasts had their effect. On dozens of worlds, alien leaders called emergency meetings. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to negotiate. Most just wanted to hide. Captain Nicole Brown was in charge of interrogating captured alien officers. She'd been trained to understand how alien minds worked, what scared them, what motivated them. "You thought Exile would break us," she told Admiral Corrin as he sat in his cell. "Instead, it taught us focus. You thought taking away our homes would make us weak. Instead, it made us determined. You thought separating us from the galaxy would limit us. Instead, it let us grow." "What do you want?" Corrin asked. "Revenge? To rule the galaxy like tyrants?" "We want what we always wanted," Brown said. "To go home. To live in peace. To raise our children without fear. The difference is now we know how to make sure we get it. And if we resist?" Brown's face was calm, but her eyes were cold. "Then you'll learn what 37 years of focused anger can accomplish." All across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity had returned. They were stronger than before, more united, more dangerous. The species that had been exiled for being too violent had spent decades learning to use violence as a precise tool. The aliens had wanted to teach humanity a lesson. Instead, they'd created their own worst nightmare, a human race that had learned to turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. The conflict was far from over. There were still alien fleets to defeat, worlds to liberate, and humans to rescue. But the hardest part was done. The galaxy now knew that humanity was back, and this time, they weren't going anywhere. 6 months after the return, the galaxy was a very different place. In the Great Council chambers, where alien leaders once made laws to control humans, President Carol Hughes now sat at the head of the table. She was calm and polite as she spoke to the assembled alien representatives. "The new trade agreements are fair to everyone," she said, looking at each alien face around the table. "Humans will provide protection and technology. You'll provide resources and labor. Everyone benefits." The crystalline ambassador raised his crystal hand. "President Hughes, what about our mining operations on Mars? We've invested much in those facilities." "You may keep them," Hughes said, "but you'll follow human safety laws now. And you'll pay human workers fair wages for their work. But that will reduce our profits significantly." Hughes smiled. It was a polite smile, but there was something cold behind it. Administrator Zatha said the same thing. "Would you like to ask him how that conversation ended?" The crystalline ambassador looked down at his notes. Everyone knew what had happened to Zatha. He was working in the same mines he'd once controlled, learning what it felt like to dig in the dirt for 16 hours daily. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the back of the room observing the proceedings. He was still a patrol officer, but now he worked for humans instead of aliens. The job was similar, but the galaxy felt different. Safer in some ways, more dangerous in others. The humans didn't rule through fear like the old alien council had. They ruled through competence. Every human vessel was exactly where it needed to be. Every human officer knew exactly what to do. The humans had turned government into a science, just like they'd turned conflict into an art. After the meeting, Morrison walked through the station corridors. The place looked the same, but it felt different. Human security officers stood at key points, but they were relaxed and professional. They didn't need to swagger or threaten. Everyone knew what they were capable of. Dr. Lisa Bennett found Morrison in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. She'd been promoted to head of xenobiological studies after the humans took over. Her job was to study how different species could work together peacefully. "How are you adjusting to the new order?" she asked. Morrison sighed. "It's strange. The humans are more polite than the old council ever was, but somehow they're also more frightening." "How so?" "The old council ruled through cruelty and fear. You always knew where you stood with them. The humans rule through excellence. They're so good at everything they do that resisting them seems pointless." Bennett nodded. "I've been studying human psychology since they returned. They're not the same species we exiled. Exile didn't break them. It refined them. Into what? Into the perfect rulers. They learned to control their emotions without losing their humanity. They learned to be efficient without being cruel. They learned to be strong without being bullies." Morrison looked out at a human patrol vessel passing by the station. It moved with perfect precision, its crew working like parts of a machine. But he knew those crew members had families they cared about, dreams they pursued, jokes they told each other. "Sometimes I wonder if we created our own replacements," he said. On Earth, the planet was healing. The gray factories were being torn down and replaced with parks and homes. The poisoned air was slowly getting cleaner. Children played in streets where human slaves had once marched to work. Captain Alex Carter walked through what used to be New York. The city was being rebuilt, but not the way it was before. It was better, cleaner, more beautiful. The humans had learned to build things that lasted. Pete Walker, the old man who'd recognized Carter's uniform, was now the mayor of the new city. He was old, but his eyes were bright with hope. "Never thought I'd live to witness this," Pete said as they watched construction crews working on a new school. "My grandchildren will grow up free." "That was always the plan," Carter said. "We just had to wait for the right time." 37 years is a long time to wait. It gave us time to plan, time to prepare, time to become what we needed to be. They watched human children playing in a park where alien factories once stood. The children laughed and ran and dreamed of the future. They'd never known slavery or fear or hopelessness. Admiral Kate Phillips stood on the bridge of her flagship, now orbiting Earth. Reports came in from across the galaxy. Human fleets patrolling trade routes. Human colonies being established on new worlds. Human scientists making discoveries that would benefit everyone. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Outer Rim. The exploration fleet has found something interesting." Phillips read the report. Her eyebrows went up. A new solar system, uninhabited, perfect for colonization. Should we send a survey team? Phillips looked out at the stars. The galaxy was big and full of wonders. There were new worlds to explore, new species to meet, new challenges to face. The human race was no longer trapped on one world or even in one system. They were free to grow and spread and become whatever they chose to be. Yes, she said. Send the Pathfinder with a full scientific team. It's time to discover what else is out there. In his quarters on the Iron Vengeance, Captain Carter received a transmission from Admiral Phillips. New worlds to explore, new challenges to face, new opportunities to grow. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. 37 years ago, humans had been angry and chaotic and dangerous. The galaxy had exiled them to teach them a lesson. The lesson had worked, just not the way the aliens intended. Humans had learned control. They'd learned patience. They'd learned to work together toward a common goal. They'd learned to be better than they were, but they hadn't learned to be weak. Carter opened a communication channel to his bridge crew. Plot a course for the Outer Rim. We have new worlds to explore? Yes, sir. Any particular destination? Carter smiled as he looked at the star charts. So many places to go. So many possibilities ahead. The humans were home now, but home was just the beginning. Wherever the stars lead us, he said, we have work to do. Lieutenant Sam Rogers, now a captain of his own vessel, received similar orders. He was young and had been born in exile, but now he commanded a craft that could travel anywhere in the galaxy. The future was full of promise. Sir, asked his navigator, what do you think we'll find out there? Rogers thought about it. They might find new friends or new enemies, new wonders or new dangers, new challenges that would test everything they'd learned. I don't know, he said, but whatever it is, we'll be ready for it. The human fleet spread out across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Not as conquerors, but as explorers. Not to destroy, but to build. Not to take, but to give. The galaxy had tried to teach humanity a lesson about power. Instead, humanity had learned a lesson about responsibility. With great strength came great duty. With great ability came great obligation. The aliens had wanted to make humans smaller. Instead, they'd made them larger. Not in size, but in purpose. Not in anger, but in wisdom. The exile was over. The banishment had ended. But the journey was just beginning. High above Earth, the human fleet stood ready. Vessels filled with explorers and scientists and dreamers. Vessels that carried not weapons of conflict, but tools of creation. Vessels that would carry humanity to places no one had ever witnessed before. The stars were calling, and humanity was ready to answer. In the observation deck of his flagship, Admiral Carter looked out at the infinite darkness filled with infinite light. Each star was a possibility. Each world was a chance to start again. We have returned, he said quietly to the stars, and now we move forward. The galaxy had taught humanity that exile could be endured. Now humanity would teach the galaxy that exile could be overcome. The banishment had ended in fire, but from that fire, something new had been born. Something stronger. Something better. Something that would never be exiled again.